The departure lounge at LAX was filled with the usual mix of hurried travelers, executives scrolling through emails, families juggling luggage, and tourists snapping last-minute pictures. Among them, a man walked with an effortless calm, his steps unhurried, his expression unreadable. Dressed in a plain black t-shirt and worn-out jeans, he carried nothing but a small backpack slung over one shoulder. There was no entourage, no flashy accessories, nothing that screamed celebrity. But those who looked twice, really looked, felt a flicker of recognition. Keanu Reeves approached the first-class gate, his ticket in hand. A flight attendant, Carla, stood at the counter, her uniform crisp, her posture perfect. She was trained to handle the elite passengers with a professional smile. But as she glanced up at the man before her, a slight frown touched her lips. Her gaze flickered over his outfit. Too simple, too ordinary. Then, her eyes caught something else. A small silver crucifix hung from a thin chain around his neck, resting lightly against his shirt. It was subtle, unpolished, and worn with time. Carla's lips pressed together, an instinctive reaction surfacing before she could control it. Something about that necklace unsettled her. "Sir, this line is for first-class passengers," she said, her tone neutral but firm. Keanu simply handed over his ticket. "I know." Carla hesitated, scanning the ticket. The name was clear. Keanu Reeves. Recognition flashed across her face, but instead of softening, her expression hardened. She had seen celebrities before. Those who dressed the part, carried designer bags, exuded wealth. But this man, something didn't sit right. She forced a polite smile and nodded, handing back his ticket. As Keanu stepped past her toward the jet bridge, Carla's gaze lingered on the crucifix. An unease settled in her chest. Minutes later, the first-class cabin was settling in. Plush seats reclined. Glasses of champagne clinked softly. Murmured conversations filled the air. Keanu sat quietly in his seat, adjusting his belt. The necklace caught the light as he moved, drawing Carla's attention once more. She walked over, her tone still composed, but with a slight edge. "Mr. Reeves, I'd like to remind you that we maintain a neutral environment in first class. Some passengers prefer discretion when it comes to personal symbols." Keanu looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "And my necklace is a problem." Carla hesitated. "We just ask passengers to be considerate of others." Keanu's fingers brushed the crucifix lightly. His voice remained calm, steady. "This isn't a statement. It's personal." Carla inhaled slowly, glancing around. Other passengers were watching now, their interest piqued. A subtle shift had begun in the cabin's atmosphere. "Perhaps you could tuck it in," she suggested, keeping her voice low. Keanu held her gaze for a long moment. Then, with quiet resolve, he said, "No." A flicker of irritation crossed Carla's face before she quickly masked it. She straightened, stepping back. "I'll be back in a moment," she murmured, before turning on her heel. As she walked toward the galley, she clenched her jaw. Something about that man, about that necklace, felt like a challenge. And she wasn't about to lose control of her flight. The plane ascended smoothly into the sky, leaving behind the glittering city lights of Los Angeles. Inside the first-class cabin, an air of quiet luxury settled over the passengers. Glasses clinked softly. A hushed murmur of conversation filled the space, and attendants moved efficiently through the aisles. But Carla's mind was elsewhere. From the galley, she stole another glance at seat 2A. Keanu sat there, his posture relaxed, but something about him felt deliberate. His crucifix remained visible against his black t-shirt, a quiet defiance she hadn't expected. She exhaled slowly. "It's just a necklace." That's what she told herself. But deep down, it wasn't just about the crucifix. It was about control. And right now, she didn't have it. Gathering herself, she turned and strode back toward him. "Mr. Reeves," she said in a voice that carried authority, though she kept her tone professional. "I need to insist that you comply with our request. We maintain a neutral environment in first class. Religious symbols can make some passengers uncomfortable." Keanu's gaze lifted to hers, calm and unwavering. "And what if someone wore a pendant of a tree, a star, a stone?" Carla hesitated. "That's different." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "Why?" A silence stretched between them. A few passengers shifted in their seats, sensing the tension. The man in seat 3B removed an earbud. The woman in seat 1C glanced over her shoulder. Carla cleared her throat, straightening. "Sir, I don't want to escalate this, but if you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to involve the captain." Keanu leaned back slightly, studying her. His voice remained even, his expression unreadable. "Then do what you need to do." Something about the way he said it made Carla's stomach tighten. She turned on her heel and walked briskly toward the cockpit. In the first-class cabin, the shift was almost palpable. Passengers whispered to one another. A man subtly angled his phone as if preparing to record. A quiet divide was forming, not just about a necklace, but about something bigger. A few minutes later, the cockpit door swung open. Captain Morales stepped out, his presence immediately commanding attention. A seasoned pilot in his 50s, his calm demeanor was the kind that could steady turbulence. Carla met him at the galley, keeping her voice low but urgent. "Sir, we have a situation. Passenger in 2A is refusing to comply with a request regarding visible religious symbols." Morales raised an eyebrow. "Is he disturbing anyone?" Carla faltered for a fraction of a second. "Not exactly, but I believe it's important to maintain order in the cabin." The captain sighed, rubbing his temple before nodding. "Let me speak with him." As he walked toward seat 2A, all eyes followed. Keanu looked up as the captain approached, his expression still unreadable. "Mr. Reeves, I'm Captain Morales. I understand there's been some concern regarding your necklace." Keanu's fingers brushed against the crucifix lightly, but he didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was steady, measured. "This necklace has been with me through war zones, hospital rooms, nights I thought I wouldn't wake from. It's not a statement. It's part of who I am." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. A few passengers held their breath. Carla folded her arms tightly across her chest, waiting for the captain to back her up. Morales studied Keanu for a long moment. Then, in a voice just as steady, he asked, "Did he break any rules?" Carla's lips parted, but nothing came out. The silence spoke louder than words. Passengers exchanged glances. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted. Not chaotic, not loud, but something was happening. Something undeniable. Keanu wasn't just wearing a necklace. He was holding up a mirror, and Carla didn't like what she saw. The tension in the first-class cabin thickened, pressing against the walls like the cabin pressure itself. No one spoke, yet everyone was listening. Carla stood stiffly beside Captain Morales, her fingers gripping the edge of her tablet. She wasn't used to being questioned, especially not in front of passengers. Morales exhaled, keeping his tone even. "Carla, if there's no rule being broken, then this is a matter of personal choice." Carla's jaw clenched. "Captain, I was only trying to maintain a neutral environment." Keanu's voice, calm yet piercing, cut through the charged silence. "Neutral for who?" The question hung in the air, sharp as glass. Carla felt the weight of every pair of eyes on her, judging her the way she had judged him. She had framed this as a matter of policy, but now it felt like something else. Something more personal. Morales studied her for a moment before turning back to Keanu. "Sir, you're free to wear your necklace. I apologize for the misunderstanding." Keanu nodded, offering nothing more. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't celebrate his win. He simply existed, unchanged. But Carla, she felt something inside her unravel. The captain turned back toward the cockpit, but as he did, Carla caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of her eye. A passenger, seat 3B, had his phone angled discreetly toward them. Recording. Her breath hitched. Had he been filming the whole time? How much had he captured? The sharp exchange? Her insistence? The moment she was put in check? Her pulse pounded in her ears. This wasn't just about a flight anymore. If that video made it online, it would become a story. And in today's world, stories didn't just fade away. They spread. They defined you. Carla swallowed hard, then spun on her heel and hurried toward the galley. She needed to breathe. She needed control. But as she stood there, gripping the counter, her mind was already racing. What if the airline saw the video? What if passengers started posting about the flight attendant who told Keanu Reeves to hide his cross? What if she had just made a very big mistake? She squeezed her eyes shut. But the worst part? She wasn't even sure why she had done it in the first place. Meanwhile, back in first class, passengers were still whispering. The energy had shifted again. This time, in Keanu's favor. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't demanded respect. And yet, somehow he had won it. Across the aisle, a woman in seat 1C leaned over slightly, offering him a small, knowing smile. The man in seat 3B tucked his phone away, nodding to himself as if he already knew how this would end. Carla, however, still had no idea, and that terrified her. The cabin had settled, but an undercurrent of tension remained. The hum of the aircraft engines filled the silence, yet it was clear. Something had shifted. Carla stood in the galley, staring blankly at her reflection in the polished metal of a cabinet door. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a glass of water, but it wasn't thirst that made her move. It was anxiety. She had lost control of the situation. Worse, she had lost control of herself. A soft chime rang out. A passenger had pressed the service button. Carla took a deep breath, composing herself, then stepped back into the aisle. Her gaze flickered toward seat 2A. Keanu Reeves was watching her. Not with anger, not with smugness, but with something worse. Understanding. She forced herself to straighten, to move toward the request light flashing above seat 3B, the man who had recorded everything. "Can I get you anything, sir?" she asked, her voice almost too even. The man tilted his head, studying her for a moment. Then, with a slight smirk, he asked, "Do you regret it?" Carla's stomach twisted. She swallowed hard. "Excuse me?" He gestured vaguely toward Keanu. You know, telling him to hide his necklace. Acting like it was a problem. Because I can tell you right now, you're the only one who thought it was. Her throat went dry. Passengers nearby glanced up, sensing another moment unfolding. But this time, Carla had no defense. She turned away without answering, walking briskly toward the galley again. Her hands clenched into fists. What was wrong with her? Why had she been so fixated on something so small? She reached into her pocket, pulling out her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she finally unlocked it. It was already online. A video clip. A caption. Flight attendant confronts Keanu Reeves. Over his necklace. His response shuts her down instantly. The post was spreading. Fast. Carla's breath hitched. Her heart pounded. This was it. She stared at the video, watching herself. Her stiff posture, her sharp tone, the way Keanu had remained calm while she unraveled. Her fingers trembled as she locked the phone. This wasn't just about a necklace. This was about who she had become. She turned, moving toward Keanu's seat before she could stop herself. Passengers subtly watched as she approached. She stopped in front of him, her hands clasped tightly together. Her mouth felt dry, but she forced herself to speak. "I was wrong." A ripple of surprise passed through the cabin. Even Keanu seemed taken aback, not by her words, but by the fact that she had said them at all. "I told myself I was protecting the cabin," she continued, her voice quieter now. "That I was being professional, but I wasn't." She exhaled, feeling the weight of the moment press against her chest. I was just protecting my own discomfort." Keanu watched her for a long moment. Then, slowly he stood. For the first time since the plane took off, Carla felt small. Not because he was famous, not because of the video, but because somehow he had never made her feel less than. She hesitated. "I don't know how to undo what I did." Keanu studied her, then simply said, "You don't have to undo it. You just have to face it." Her breath caught. She had spent years hiding behind rules, behind protocol, behind the need to control. Now, there was nothing left to hide behind. Keanu gave her a small nod before lowering himself back into his seat. Carla stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of her choices settle inside her. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. But something had changed. And for the first time in a long time, Carla wasn't afraid to see it.